Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. My name is Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com. We thank everybody for subscribing on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and, of course, for checking us out at the CFB Nation YouTube channel we've got going. And we appreciate everybody as we grow the podcast here in the off season. Today, we are joined by a senior editor at The Athletic, Mitch Light, good friend of mine. And Bill, before I let Mitch come on here, I want to tell you that he is taking time out on his 25th wedding anniversary to talk college football recruiting on the All-America podcast. How about that?
Yeah, I had my 14th last week, so congratulations on that, Mitch, and thanks for being that's a 5-star material right there.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's funny. My wife's a school teacher, and she left. Usually I'm sleeping when she leaves. And she's like, "We made it 25 years." I said, and as Bill knows this, Trocchi knows this, I said, actually, we got to get to about 11:30 a.m. We had an early wedding. So I guess once I get to 11:30 a.m. Central Time, I'll have made it 25 years. So, but thanks, guys. I'm not really doing anything today. It's just a typical day. So 25, it's a big number, but it's just a normal day.
It's a big number. I was there. I was the best man, Bill. I was the best man at Mitch's wedding, and forced to give a toast, but wonderful day, wonderful family.
4-star toast, I'd say. It wasn't 5. It was solid. It was not. Could have been better. Could have been a lot worse. Trust me.
Anyway, so the reason we have Mitch on here, besides being his 25th wedding anniversary, is The Athletic conducted a really, really cool, extensive study on recruiting to try to pinpoint which schools best develop prospects for the NFL draft, which is appropriate with the draft coming this week. Mitch, just for listeners, give a brief overview for those who haven't seen it yet. I know it's created quite a buzz on Twitter and everything, but for listeners who haven't seen it, give a brief overview of how you guys tried to attack the research on this project.
Yeah, well, the idea was actually David Ubbins, one of my colleagues, and he got the idea. He was talking to a Power 5 head coach, not a blue blood Power 5 head coach, and the coach was just sort of saying, "Yeah, I mean, all the Alabamas and the Georgias and Ohio States, all those schools, they get credit for all producing the most NFL draft picks, and sure they do, but they're signing the best players. People should look at the percentage of players you sign who get drafted and what percentage of 4 stars and 3 stars." So Dave's like, this is kind of interesting. So actually, he started doing the research on his own. I think he got about 2 hours in. It's like, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be fun. So he enlisted me and Ari Wasserman, and I work close, as you guys know, I work closely with Ari Wasserman, our national recruiting writer. And we dove in and helped him with the research, and basically just we picked. David started it all, so we kind of went with the parameters that he started with because it wouldn't have made sense to start from scratch. So took the recruiting classes from 2009 through 2019 and the corresponding draft classes from 2012 through 2022, and just added up every Power 5 school how many 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars they signed, and then looked up how many of those guys were drafted. Now, not a perfect study by any stretch. There's flaws. There's certain guys at the front end who aren't accounted for. There's certain guys at the back end who aren't accounted for, and we'll get into this later. There's just so many 3 stars, and not all 3 stars are created equally. But we figured as a whole, it would give a nice snapshot of which schools are doing the best developing their players. And that's basically the genesis of it. And one thing about it, too, we can get into this is probably the last time this study makes sense, because if you just try it in a few years, there's going to be way too many transfers. It's just the term development is going to go out the door. It's sure, teams are going to brag about how many draft picks they get, but it's not going to be as common where they get them in as a 3-star as a freshman, and they just, for 5 years, they develop, and then they're a 6th-round draft pick.
Right. You guys basically said if a kid transferred, that you no longer got credit for him, even if he made the pros. Just to make
it's the school that produced
understandable.
Yeah, it's the school that produced him gets the credit, which is, again, you could argue that does that make sense, but we had to account for him somehow. We didn't want to double count for him. So, and there were not a lot of transfers from this time frame from up until 2019. It was pretty rare.
Right. So, well, you divided it into 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. The best teams and the worst teams in each kind of category, subcategory. What were some of your conclusions in the 5-star category? One that jumped out to me, just looking at the numbers, LSU, that they always get tons of pub, like that Power 5 coach was talking to Ubben about. They crush it in the NFL draft, but their, conversion rate, less than 50% of their 5-stars are getting drafted, which I thought was kind of surprising. And I saw LSU and Notre Dame both kind of at the bottom of that category, but had good conversion rates among the 4-star category.
Yeah, I don't want to start this off by like poking holes and saying don't read the study, but like I found the 5-stars almost the least interesting is not the right word, the least telling, because there's so few and the numbers can be skewed by one or two guys. Like Stanford's number, we went in with, we had to come up with a minimum. We picked 5 5-stars because there's not a lot of 5-stars. So Stanford's number 1 at 5 out of 6. So again, the percentages can be changed so much by one or two guys. So like the things that stood out to me were on the bottom end, actually. Texas and Oklahoma. Texas was not a surprise based on their underachieving nature as a program. 4 out of 17 for 23.5%. Oklahoma was a little bit of a surprise. 3 out of 12 at 25%. But again, we're only talking about 12 guys over 11 years. So as I've talked about this, I've tried not to make too many sweeping generalizations about the 5-stars. I find the 4-star and the 3-star data is compelling. One thing too, did you guys look at this number? So like, I didn't know what to expect. What do you think the overall conversion rate of a 5-star is? I didn't know going in. I don't even know what I would have guessed. I'm just asking you.
To convert a 5-star to a first rounder is rare, but to convert a 5-star to any draft pick, I would think would be close to 50%.
What do you think, Bill?
I was going to say 50 to 60% because they can, even if it's not developed 5-star talent, an NFL team would still take a chance on it.
Right. It's 57.9. And one of the guys we singled out was Chantrell Henderson from went to Miami. His number 1 overall pick. Now, I think he might still be, or he had an NFL career, so it wasn't like he was a bust, but he was a 7th round pick, I believe. So he's a case where I think it was the Bills. They probably just like, this guy's got tons of talent, might not have worked out at Miami. We're going to draft him. So I think those guys, the former 5-stars, get the benefit of the doubt at the back end of the NFL drafts. But I just found that interesting. But basically 58% of 5-stars over an 11-year period got drafted.
Well, and that was kind of my question to you. Clemson, out of the 5-stars, they have a very high conversion rate. And it's kind of a twofold question. One, pretty good development by Dabo, obviously. But 2, DJ's in the news now. So, with the transfer portal and the NIL, is this something are they a school that you would have a concern with down the road with that conversion rate because of the way he recruits versus how it's going to have to change?
I don't think the conversion rate will change because I think he's got a good developmental program. That's how they kind of made their rise. And also getting 2 generational talents at quarterback in Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. I'd be more concerned about their ability to bring those guys in, and whether it's NIL, whether it's the transfer portal, a little bit of everything, their program taking just a half a step back. Just look this up. 5-stars in the class of 20 for Clemson. That's a lot. There's only about 32, 33 5-stars. 3 5-stars in 21, 2 5-stars in 22, 1 5-star in 23, and none so far in 24. Now it's still early there. So they're just not bringing in, they're still recruiting well. They're just not bringing in the same high caliber of player. So we talk a lot about it on our podcast, Stars Matter. Ari's been on is this a sustainable model going forward? Dabo's strict, I wouldn't say no transfers, but he's aversion to transfers. Their NIL policy, depending on who you ask, how aggressive that is. So that is definitely a program to watch going forward with their ability to get these 5-stars in. But to answer your question, I don't really question their ability to develop them.
I want to talk. All right, let's move on to the 4-star category. And one thing that struck me was the University of Miami, who had a good conversion rate.
It was a surprise.
Right. It was a surprise to me. You would think that would translate to on-field success. I looked during the time of your study. The Hurricanes finished in the top 25 only 3 times and inside the top 20 just once. Like a couple of them were 23, 24, something like that. Why do you think that did not translate? Their ability to develop 4-stars into NFL prospects didn't translate into more wins and losses.
I'm sure it's a lot of things. I'd say lack of continuity. They had, how long was Mark Richt there? Probably 5 years. Maybe there was some stability there with Richt, but we know going to Manny Diaz, and before that, a lot of turnover. And I don't know where I remember seeing this, and I apologize to Miami people if I'm just, taking a message board rumor somewhere, but it seemed like there was some talk out there with maybe some previous staffs that the staffs at Miami maybe did a little star chasing, would just recruit the guys, were interested as a staff in signing a lot of, rather than doing their own evaluations. I think there's probably a lot of staffs over the past 10, 15 years that are guilty of that. Coaches like to have high recruiting rankings. So, it's sort of, I don't really have a great answer other than I would probably just say lack of stability within the program.
I was going to ask about Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. And maybe it's just mine, but like it basically 1 and 3 go to the NFL out of their 4-star guys. And why does that seem low to me? Because I know how many they get. And I know, is it just the product of the accumulation with it? Because when I look at their recruiting rankings every year, and then you look back, you're like, oh yeah, that guy was a 4-star. What happened to him? Is that what it is? Basically 1 and 3, not bad.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think the math is just the more you sign, the harder it is to keep that number up. And no team that signed more than 30 4-stars over the stretch had a higher percentage. 36 was the most. So the teams that did a little bit better, they didn't sign as many. So it's a good question. I probably would have expected a higher number too, but the fact that no team that signed a high volume of 4-stars converted at a higher rate than 36% just tells you that I wouldn't say impossible. It's just it wasn't done during this stretch. So that definitely was a little bit of a surprise for me.
And you look at the bottom 10 of the 4-stars and the development, and this is what you were talking about, the reflecting the on-field underachieving a little bit. Teams that get high recruiting rankings but have not been very successful. Number 1 by far, Nebraska, of course. Tennessee has not lived up to the hype for a while. Texas is on this list as kind of underachieving type of teams. Texas A&M. Is this the most telling section of your study, you think?
Yeah, I think so. And some of those Lane Kiffin classes at Tennessee, which I guess he was 2010, I believe, right? So he would have been in this. I remember he signed a great class, but you look a year later and none of those guys were there, so right. A lot of attrition there. The most surprising stat to me in this whole project was Nebraska's 4-star ratio. I mean, just stunning. 3 of 67. I mean, I think I could be the offensive coordinator, Troche special teams, Bill Bender defensive coordinator, and we could develop at a higher rate than that. And that just tells you why. Because, there's a lot of talk about Nebraska. Oh, they can't recruit in this climate. They're geographically too remote. That's not true. They signed top 25 classes consistently during this span. They just did not develop. They maybe poor evaluation for their program. So that was just staggering right there. And obviously Texas and Tennessee programs that have not had a lot of stability. And another very surprising stat to me was your beloved Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, Troche. First of all, they signed 0 4-stars during this stretch, which is hard to do, to have a school located in Atlanta, Georgia, and sign 0 4-stars. I realized Paul Johnson and the option, they maybe were recruiting a little different. And they had a lot of success. So credit to Georgia Tech. But they went 0 for 14. Only signed 14, and none of them were drafted. So that was a bit of a surprise for me as well.
No 5-stars and 14 4-stars. Is that what you meant?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
And the 14 and did not convert any of those 4. They were 0 for 14 in converting their 4-stars.
Well, my daughter's 5-star flag on the flag.
Yeah, but she's class of 20. She's after this, so she's a late sign. It's actually, she was a late commit. Good.
True, she was.
Good get for the Jackets.
Well, Mitch, before I even clicked on this, the first 2 schools that popped in my head, and Bill, as Bill probably told you, I'm in Big Ten country. Yeah. It was Wisconsin and Iowa. Those are the first, like when I think 3-star U, I think Wisconsin, Iowa. They develop guys. Now, some of their guys are 4-stars. So what were your reads on how the project treated those 2 schools? And I guess it's kind of a two-way question too. Will that change with Luke Fickell at Wisconsin? Because he was able to develop, as I told Ari a few weeks ago, Cincinnati had 13 NFL draft picks the last 2 years. So, I mean, is that something with Wisconsin that might change a little bit?
Yeah, we should have gone and checked Cincinnati. We didn't treat them as a Power 5 because they're not a Power 5 yet. So I'm like you guys, I wish I would have written some stuff down, like preconceived thoughts, because now that I know the numbers, it's easy for me to say, well, that makes sense. But the first thing, and, intuitively following recruiting, I knew this, but there's so many 3-stars that you start at like the number 450 kid and you go to like the number 1500 kid. So Iowa, yes, they developed very well. We got a lot of angry comments about Iowa. You didn't give them enough credit. Well, it's like we didn't do anything. We just presented the numbers. Numbers speak for themselves. So like Iowa had the most 3-stars drafted at 26 of all schools, more than Alabama, more than anyone. But they're just signing so many more than Alabama, Ohio State. Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia, they're signing a decent amount of 3-stars, but they're in the 400, 500, 600 range. And those guys are better players than a bulk of the Iowa guys and the Wisconsin guys are in the 600, 700, 800 range. So they're going to be developed at a higher percentage. One thing and Ari was responsible for the Big Ten. So I would take all the Big Ten numbers with a grain of salt because Ari did that research. He probably just got fed up and made them up. He doesn't like the research. But Wisconsin probably was the unofficial 2-star winner. Like Ari's they had a lot of, and we did not include 2-stars in our data. Maybe we should have just lumped them in 3 stars. But like Georgia Tech, actually Boston College was a school. I know I'm rambling, but Boston College numbers, they also had a lot of 2-stars. I did the ACC. So probably Boston College and Wisconsin were the schools that had the most 2-stars developed. So that's a credit for them. But I think the preconceived notion that those schools do a good job developing 3-stars is true. They just sign so many more, and the quality of their 3-stars isn't as good as other programs, so the percentages aren't going to be as high.
A couple of schools that like Bill was saying that popped in your head as kind of overachieving teams relative to recruiting rankings. I expected Oklahoma State to kind of show up. I know they're not rated very highly recruiting wise. And they've been very, very good for a while, this whole decade, really, of the study that you did for the most part. And Utah too is a team that I don't think they recruit very well, but they've, really charged up the Pac-12 food chain, as you like to say. Boise State, I know they weren't top 5, Power 5, so you probably didn't look at them. But those are kind of schools that I expected to see a little more of in this study.
Yeah, I'm just looking up Oklahoma State in my big spreadsheet here. I would put Oklahoma State as sort of like, I don't know if this is fair to like the anti-Wisconsin. Like, I don't think they get a ton of guys drafted. Like, they overachieve on the field, maybe with their talent. I don't think they put a ton of guys out in the NFL. But that is a program there. And this sort of like, Bill, your question, sort of like Bender's question there. It's just like, 3-star, the developmental programs. To back up my point before, the average ranking of Alabama's 3-stars over our time frame, that 11-year period, was number 592 nationally. And that includes some flyers and some guys in the thousands who are 3-stars. In the 2023 cycle alone, there were 6 Power 5 teams that didn't sign a top 600 recruit. So they're like average of their quote-unquote worst players is better than a lot of schools' players. And Ohio State's average was 606, so right there. So that just tells you that the average of their 3-stars is by far better than the average of everyone else's. But, Utah is a program that they are recruiting better. I think they signed maybe 6 4-stars in this 2023 recently complete 23 cycle, but definitely a good developmental program. So I think the programs that we think develop well actually do develop well, but they're varying. They show up in varying levels, and that's just based on the quantity of guys they sign.
So this study that you undertook and all these hours and conclusions and everything is that Ohio State and Alabama are really good.
Yes.
So
sign the best players and you'll be the best team. That's my advice to college recruiting staffs. Just get the best players. Now, I mean, we're obviously a little great take that with a grain of salt because it is about evaluation and all that stuff. And as we talked about with Clemson, it also helps having a really good quarterback. I mean, you can look at Iowa. They're all over the NFL draft this year, a couple days. They're going to have a lot of guys drafted. And they were good, but think how much better they would be with a better quarterback and a functional offense. All the credit to Iowa, all the angry Iowa fans that email or that made comments. That program does do a great job developing.
And you may be their next offensive coordinator if they don't score more points this year. So you can go, or I think Bill, you said Bill's the offensive coordinator.
Yes.
So Bill can go do that. Have fun.
Yeah, good luck.
So, and then we'll put sign the best players. You'll have the best teams. We're going to replace that in the Notre Dame locker room over playing like a champion today, and they'll win a national title. So
yeah,
I don't have anything else for him, Bill. This was an amazing research. It really was.
for anyone who hasn't seen it, we encourage you to go to The Athletic and check it out. These guys do a great job. They've done several studies over the years since Mitch kind of grew that little recruiting department over there, and it's really taken off. And if you want to follow recruiting and you don't want to get into the absolute weeds like some of the recruiting services, Athletics is a great place to keep up with it. Mitch, go enjoy your day. Go enjoy your evening. Say hello to Heather for me, and we appreciate you making some time.
I will. Thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Happy anniversary. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Very good. All right.
Cool.
Well, I enjoyed that little segment. What'd you think? What'd you learn from that study that the Athletic did? I thought it was pretty intense and had a few surprises, but it reflected the fact that what we already knew, that Texas and Nebraska and then some of the teams at Tennessee, they get these high recruiting rankings, but they are not winning on the field. And that's reflected in the NFL draft.
Yeah, and that's this week, right? So we have the NFL draft, and I help with our coverage at Sporting News, and I like looking at draft trends and all those things. I every year do our draft by college. I track it during the draft. I literally track which college the guys go to. So as soon as the draft's over, we get that quick headline. But to me, you get that question during the why is Florida not good if they had 7 guys drafted? Why is LSU? LSU was a good one, Bill, because they do dominate in the draft every year. Like maybe not at an Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State level, but they produce a ton of picks. You know who else does? USC. And I'm wondering how that's going to change. Maybe not this year, but with Lincoln Riley, how much offensive talent are they going to put in the draft? It didn't dawn on me until last night. You know, you read Twitter. Jordan Addison's a very good football player, and he's probably not getting talked about very much heading into this draft. So I think that's another very interesting guy.
Yeah, he may sneak in the first round. We'll see. I listened to Peter King's podcast yesterday, and he was talking about Jordan Addison, early second round, late first round type of guy. After succeeding in 2 different offensive systems in college, and he's going to be really good. All right, let's.